Let's rock and roll. What's our line item for? Okay, we ready? You ready? Session? No, not today.
Yeah, because they're part of the general.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. This meeting of the Madera County Board of Supervisors is now called to order, and we'll begin with we have a quorum, everybody present. We're going to I think we'll go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance and a benediction. So Joel, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And after that, Rob, would you lead us in a... Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Remain standing, please, and we'll have the invocation.
Father, we're thankful for starting new together as your guidance and factors not even aware of today, especially tires. Western state. Vision, guidance, and interview.
Amen. Thank you, Rob. Okay, public comment.
The first 15 minutes of each regular session are set aside for members of the public to address the board on any matter under the jurisdiction of the board, but not appearing on the agenda. The board will not take action on any of these items presented under public comment. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Anyone addressing the board is asked to print their name clearly on the speaker sheet at the podium and state their name and county of residence for the record.
Okay, is there anyone from the public here to address the board? Do not see anybody coming forward. We do have two comments from, or let's see, one is related to the budget, so that's not a public comment. That would be a comment on the budget. And the other is a public comment, and that is from Michelle Garcia, and we'll note that. It goes into the record. And then the other one will be noted and put into the record as received as an email. Those were distributed to the supervisors. Okay, at this time, we're going to open the public hearing on the budget, and we'll begin the process. CAO?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I have the floor?
Yes, you can.
To avoid the appearance of impropriety, I will abstain from today's board meeting because the budget will be discussed and I'm related to a department head. I will leave the room now.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor, and appreciate your forthrightness.
Into the table.
Yes, Chairman, and I'll remind the board that today's budget resolution requires a 4/5 vote.
Right,
Government code.
so we'll need a unanimous. We all do. Yeah. Okay, CAO.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is the time for your budget hearing, which normally occurs in June, as you know, or as you recall, you adopted a continuation budget in June into September. Normally, we'd all be sitting down at the table, but with COVID, with your permission, I'll return to my seat, and Joel and Jessica will drive the presentation. They'll start off with a PowerPoint, and then we are going to go down the list that was distributed to you in terms of how we go through the departments, and we'll be available to handle any questions during the hearing, and then we'll move on to the public session item. Thank
Thank
you.
you, CAO, and you're at liberty. Okay. Staff?
All right. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Joel Begay, County Administrative Office. With me in the table is Jessica Leon from the Admin Office. We will begin with an overview of the appropriations recommended for your approval today. The general fund is recommended at $307,120,307, which reflects a $16.2 million increase, largely not due to discretionary revenue, in fact, not due to discretionary revenues, and we will go over that in the rest of the presentation. There's several increases in the county's other funds, whether it's special revenue or enterprise funds, the largest of which is in the road fund. And as you would be able to identify in the budget, that's largely due to budgeting a lot of SB1 and other third-party grant-funded projects. Overall, the county's budget is growing by $45 million. Okay, next slide, please. For the general funds, major categories, this reflects the board's priority. Despite the budget challenges, it still reflects the board's priority of prioritizing public protection. Public protection expenditures continue to grow. This reflects recommendation to budget 5 FTEs from a COPS hiring grant that was the county was awarded recently, as well as other cooperative agreements with entities within the county, such as the Valley Children's Hospital. For the general government category, it is increasing. That is solely due to a GIS-based layer map update project, close to $1.2 million, cooperatively funded by third-party state grant funding, discretionary revenues that's been dedicated by the board as part of the grant, and as well as third-party fee revenue available from the CED department. The special payments and insurance is the only major category that's showing a decrease in overall appropriations due to the budget crisis. Insurance rates, we found ways to keep insurance rates low and help the departments out as they balance their budget targets. But at the same time, decisions made by your board to restructure debt in conjunction with financing of the Hall of Justice facility gives us a little bit of a breather in terms of total debt service during this difficult budget time. There's major increases in the health sanitation, largely due to pandemic response expenses experienced by the health department, but as well as increasing costs of mental health services for the behavioral health services department. And finally, public assistance continues to increase, but is solely funded by third-party state and federal revenue. Next slide, please. General fund revenues is projected at $302,655,150, roughly a $21 million increase, majority of which are third-party intergovernmental revenues. This does reflect the county budgeting $4.4 million of CARES Act funds that we received from the state. Those funds are being used strategically for discretionary revenue resources that have been redirected for the pandemic response. So that helps. That is a portion of what staff utilize in order to balance this recommended budget. The projected general fund balance carryover from the prior fiscal year is $7,422,824, which reflects the fund balance policy reserve that your board approved intact coming into the fiscal year, but despite best efforts for budgetary reductions, the fiscal crisis necessitates us to utilize a portion of that reserve in order to balance recommended budget. Staff's best projections at this point will require reducing that reserve from $7.4 million to just under $3 million in order to pass a balanced budget. Next slide, please. So we felt that it's important to highlight, despite the growing budget numbers, we felt that it's important to highlight where discretionary revenues went from the beginning of the budget process to today. So the first column here shows the $85.8 million is what the adopted discretionary revenue, or what we commonly refer to as the net county cost. That was the 1920 adopted budget. If the red column represents the hypothetical discretionary revenue requirement if we were to have just maintained current service levels. So if we were to maintain current service levels, having to pay for the full year impact of the COLAs that were approved in January, as well as retirement costs and retiree health costs, that net county cost level would have grown to 87.6 million. Through cost-cutting efforts and infusion of CARES Act revenues, we were able to reduce the net county cost requirement for this proposed budget to $79.5 million, which allowed us to balance in conjunction with utilization of a portion of the fund balance policy reserve. We would like to note that the fire equipment reserve of $1 million is intact and is not recommended to be utilized on any expenditures in the proposed budget.
Thank you.
This slide represents the discretionary and non-discretionary portions of the budget or the funding in the budget. Discretionary revenue remains at 20% compared to the total budget, and it reflects that the board's priority, the 65% of discretionary revenues goes towards public protection purposes. The public assistance remains at 4%, which consists of non-negotiable local match for third state and federal programs. Contingencies were reduced to zero in the proposed budget. It reflects a reduction of $700,000, which is what was included in the 1920. After reviewing actual expenditures and the contingencies for the previous fiscal year, staff felt that there's enough enhancements that were done in the individual line items of departments that we can pass on we can recommend a proposed budget that has $0 for contingencies. It does make it tighter, but we felt there's enough appropriations authority within the departments that we can accommodate minor unforeseen events. So the 16.2 million is largely due to these factors, and we can go over them one by one quickly. The full year impact of the COLA on the overall budget is $2.7 million. Now, a good portion of that is funded by subvented funding, but it is a good portion of the 16.2 million increase in the general fund appropriations. Retirement benefit costs increased 4.7 million. We are in the third years of a 3-year phase-in of CalPERS reducing the discount rate, so we're feeling the brunt of that. Retiree health program continues to increase at $600,000 compared to the prior year. The county GIS base layer map that we mentioned earlier is a $1.2 million project. 66% of that is funded by state grant funds, and then the county match is split between fee revenue and discretionary revenues. The COPS hiring grant will add 5 FTEs over the course of 3 years at the sheriff's office. There is matching requirements in that. The proposed budget includes matching funds for the COPS hiring grant. And then public health and mental health services combined $9 million increase. These are subvented dollars. And the final slide, just kind of going over the retiree health, we've shown this every year. Why it continues to increase is really pointing to the ratios of actives and retirees. So as we tighten the budgets and we have less actives in the system, and the ratio of actives and retirees continue to decrease. So it's just the natural trend. So that's why the health costs, in addition to premium cost increases for the health insurance program. That ends our formal presentation. Staff's available for any questions before we move on to the main budgets.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate that. One of the, so I know I realize at different times we have to dip into that fund balance to balance out. It's just like any of us in our households, when there's times that you need to dip into those things, that's what they're there for. But anytime you do that, you need a plan of how to build it back up for the next time. You can't continue to dip into those. What would be our plan moving forward to start to replenish that? Or how do you see that happening in the next few years?
Yes, Supervisor. So I will direct your board to slide 5, and Jessica, if you could pull that up. I think that's a graphic that we could best answer that question. So the the draw from the fund balance policy service 4.4 million, and compared to the second line, that 75 million of discretionary revenues that we're projecting in this year, had it not been for COVID, we would have expected that number to have been 78. So I think the logic that we have in the proposed budget is to use the reserve to allow us, to allow the revenues to recover, and at the same time, making concerted effort to control the draw on the discretionary revenues. So departments collectively made 3.7 million in reductions in discretionary revenue use in the proposed budget. We are going to continue to work with the departments to limit the growth of the draw discretionary revenues. That likely will result in temporary unfunding of positions until this discretionary revenue is received recovers back to the level that we were projecting before the COVID-19 fiscal crisis kicked into place. There's also the strategic use of CARES Act funds. There are pandemic response activities not yet being reimbursed by the CARES Act that we can still draw from, but we're looking at that judiciously to make sure, number one, we're meeting federal guidance. We're being conservative in what CARES Act money we provide, but we're also being mindful that that's one-time revenue that, in conjunction with this, helping plug some of the revenue deficits. I think, it's going to require departments to be mindful of not growing that discretionary revenue. We will need to hold that 79.5 million net county costs for a period of a year or two, to allow this $75 million discretionary revenue to catch up before we start discussing growing full discretionary revenue fund positions. That's basically we're using some one-time revenue to help us phase in these cost reductions or cost avoidance in some instances, because we're foregoing funding certain positions until the revenue recovers.
Thank you. And I know that in June, we had pushed these back to September to get a better idea of what the impacts are going to be. How comfortable are you with the understanding of what the impacts of COVID-19? Now, all of a sudden, we have the fires as well, and there's going to be some issues that come from that. But how comfortable are you with these numbers that these are, because again, they were completely up in the air in May.
Right.
So how comfortable are you with these now?
It's hard to assign a percentage, but one thing though is the actual impact was slightly better than what we initially projected, which is a good thing. If your board recalls, in the beginning of the process, we were anticipating to make 5.7 million in cuts. Several things have happened, and even though procedurally it's not the ideal thing to delay the budget, it was necessary, and it was a good decision by your board, because CARES Act funds were pushed by the state in between that time. Had it not been for that 3.7 million reduction would have been truly $5.7 million. We would not have been able to bank on getting reimbursed for some of those funds. And now some of those pandemic response activities would have been likely FEMA eligible, which is a 6 to 12 month process. They would not have been available funds to balance the budget. So that's one advantage of the delay. As far as comfort level about the impacts of the fire, it's really, we're just trying to wrap our heads around that part. What we will say though is we did not count on increasing TOT revenue in the curve. If the fire did not happen, we would have projected some recovery given the projected impact COVID-19 was not as bad. It was still bad, but it was not as bad as originally projected. However, with the fires complicating that, we are continuing to project declines or maintaining the decline in the TOT revenue. So this $75 million would likely be still a conservative estimate for the budget year. I can't assign a percentage.
No problem. And I want to thank you for your guidance during that time to get us to this point, and not taking the sky is falling, even though it seemed like it was, and it still may by the end of 2020. I don't know if the sky can't fall, but if it's going to be this year. And so I appreciate your cool head to push us back to get us to where we're at right now and have better numbers. So thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Supervisor, we failed to point out that there is still a hiring control process in place, and that credit to that goes to the departments for being mindful of the for meeting the targets that our office has set in terms of discretionary revenue reduction. So,
Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you. Just wondering what that KU was on.
Kansas University.
Joe, on that last page on the major cost drivers, retiree health, that second bullet point, 540,000, is that increase of, is that just for retirees, or is that for the whole system
that's for retirees, Mr. Supervisor.
only?
Yeah.
Well, it
So,
increased $540,000 last year.
right, the entire line item for the retiree health program is 4.7 million currently. When I first started here, it was just over $3 million. So in 3 years, it's growing $500,000 each year. Now, not all of it is discretionary. However, third-party revenues are also limited. So it's forcing a lot of the vented departments to absorb those costs, and it continues to grow.
I think something we ought to address here.
On the, you described the impacts of the possible impacts of the fire, and it's my understanding that the Red Cross and institutions that are helping with the fire victims and displaced people are placing them in hotels. Are those? And I'm not sure what's happening with that. How that's happening? Are they giving them vouchers? Are they? How is that being reimbursed? And is it being reimbursed through FEMA? And does that pay TOT as well? That's a question that I was pondering.
Mr. Chairman, that's probably a question for the sheriff or his staff. But before that, if we could go back to Supervisor Frazier's question, this grant is, or excuse me, the Creek Fire is eligible for an FMAG, which is a federal reimbursement process. You receive about 75% back on your dollar for each county expense. It'll probably take up to 18 months for you to receive that money, so there might be a little bit of cash flow there. But normally what happens is the Red Cross does congregate shelters. Public Health helps us open. Red Cross then helps run them. Public Health helps staff them with a public health nurse and other folks. However, with COVID, they are putting them up in hotels. So I don't know if that's actually been decided yet or not, whether the Red Cross is paying for that through the donations they're receiving from the fire, or if the Red Cross is going to try to bill us back for that. So I don't know if the sheriff can answer that or not at this point.
John is way up to the podium. I asked these questions in anticipation of what is going to happen with the budget. I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned about us paying for that or for them receiving that. It's necessary to stay. Go ahead, Sheriff.
Morning, Chairman, members of the board, excuse me. Tyson Pogue, Madera County Sheriff. In regards to your first question, as far as them paying TOT tax, it's my understanding that they do. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I'm not aware of any exemption. I'm not aware of any exemption, so I'm fairly certain to tell you that, yes, they do pay the TOT tax. In regards to who's paying for the hotel visits, at this point, it's still Red Cross. We are not funding those. We've never received a bill from them, so I believe that they bill back the FMAG directly.
Okay, so will they eventually bill us, or would that be paid through their donations or the feds or FEMA?
Correct. So they will bill back the federal or the fire management assistance grant directly, and they'll get their funds directly back from that
Wonderful.
process.
That's really excellent.
They did make a request that we start paying those to be completely transparent. And at this point, there was no further discussion of that. They've not asked us to pay any bills. There's been no agreement to pay any bills. But that was initially discussed early in this incident.
I didn't want to turn this into a discussion about the emergency, but while we're on that subject, there are apparently two places where for evacuations now, and they're trying for a third in Porterville or somewhere. But I was gonna let you know that Cornerstone Church in
Clovis.
Coachella is I'm in talks with one of their heads he would like to have that considered as a place for evacuees. They're offering quite a bit of assistance, including monetary, food, and all that kind of thing. So you might want to touch base with them.
I appreciate it. I'll pass that along to the Red Cross who's handling our evacuees.
And I gave him their email as well, so he try to get in touch with them. Is that Marion or?
Our contact is Katrina Poitras.
Oh, okay. Can you send me that contact so I can get it to him?
I'll send it to him right now.
I will.
Thank you very
And
much.
with congregate sheltering during the fire incident, it's a little bit more complicated during the COVID incident.
Yeah.
Typically, we would open a mass shelter and have your typical cots and evacuees, but
Right.
with COVID-19, it's a little bit more difficult. And
Right. I understand. So they want to help with that.
appreciate
They
that.
got a large facility there. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on. Can't hear you.
Good morning, Board.
There you go.
Yvette Gomez with Administrative Office. I will start with the first recommended budget for your consideration is for the Board of Supervisors found on page 1 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,900,000 to $286 reflects an increase of $41,127 over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to the cost of maintaining current staffing levels. This budget has 16 allocated positions, of which 2 are unfunded. Karen Pogue, Chief Clerk of the Board, is available for any questions.
Questions? Okay, next budget.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the Administrative Management and Purchasing budget found on page 9 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures are $1,054,338, reflecting an increase of $101,207 over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to the cost of maintaining current staffing levels. This budget has a staffing allocation of 9 positions, of which 3 are unfunded. Joel Bouguet, Deputy CAO, is available for any questions.
Questions? Okay, next.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the 311 Customer Service Center found on page 15 of the budget book. The recommended expenditures of $304,002 reflect an increase of $15,059 over the current fiscal year, primarily due to increased staffing costs to maintain current service levels. There are 4 allocated positions in this budget, all of which are recommended to be funded. We are available for any questions.
Say, Mr. Chairman, this is one of the best things we've ever done. There now with this emergency stuff going on. Every second, I say.
Yeah, it's just proven to be really, really well organized and very well utilized. Absolutely. And in multiple ways.
Yeah, I mean, just shows though how good it is.
Yes, true.
Thank
Sure.
you. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
The next budget for your consideration is the special payments budget found on page 21 of the budget book. This budget is administered by the Administrative Office, has no allocated positions, and funds a variety of payments and expenses which are not easily categorized in other budgets. The recommended expenditures are $4,638,677, is a decrease of $299,410 over the previous fiscal year. We are available for any questions.
Next.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the Health and Services budget found on page 27 of the budget book. This budget is administered by the Administrative Office, has no allocated positions, and was established to pay lease payments for the Health and Social Services complex and adequately track charges to fully offset these costs in the annual cost plan. Recommended expenditures are $4,068,968, reflecting an increase of $1,983,062 over the previous fiscal year. Joel Bouguet, Deputy CAO, is available for any questions.
Vaughn?
The next recommended budgets for your consideration are the COVID-19 operations budgets found on page 29 of the budget book. These budgets are also administered by the Administrative Office, have no allocated positions, and were established to track revenues and expenditures related to the COVID-19 response. Recommended expenditures are $252,000 for operations, $548,000 for quarantine operations, and $67,594 for emergency homelessness assistance. We are available for any questions.
This is quite an increase from last year.
Next.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the insurance budget found on page 33 of the budget book. This budget covers administering the county's risk management and insurance programs, coordinating the county's routine and contracted legal services, administering the county's self-insured workers' compensation and general liability programs, and coordinating the county's safety program required by Cal OSHA. Recommended expenditures are $5,122,337, reflecting a decrease of $12,896,000. This budget has a staffing allocation of 2 positions, of which are both funded. We are available for any questions. The next recommended budget for your consideration is the central services budget found on page 41 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures are $589,566, reflecting an increase of $37,411 over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to increased costs for rents and leases of equipment for an internal postage meter, inserter folder, binding machine, copier, and county vehicle mileage charges. The department recommends a staffing allocation of 2 positions, of which 1 is unfunded. We are available for any questions.
The copier or replacement copier or another copier?
I think that was from last year.
Yeah, so this is to maintain services for the current copier that we do have. It is not purchasing a new copier.
Okay. And given our electronic replacement policy, moving more and more toward electronic storage and electronic use, away from the paper trail, paper use, we're not growing that particular use, are we?
No, not at
I wanted to
all.
make sure.
The copier also serves as a scanner that
Correct.
creates that digital record, correct?
Yes.
Very good. Very good. We want to continue that policy. That needs to be done in every department for electronics. When not necessary, we don't make copies. That's huge expense. Huge. Millions overall. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And we did do that this year for the budget binder. There was about 5 department heads that just accepted it electronically. So
Very good. Continue to do that.
the next recommended budget for your consideration is for County Council, found on page 47 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures are $1,552,550, of which reflects no increase over the previous fiscal year. There are no allocated positions in this budget, as County Council services are provided through an agreement with a private law firm. Regina Garza, County Council, is available for any questions on this budget.
We finally hit our number. All right.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the Human Resources budget found on page 51 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures are $1,613,228, reflecting a slight increase of $6,423 over the previous fiscal year. The department recommends a staffing allocation of 13 positions, of which 1 is recommended to be unfunded. Elba Gomez, Director of Human Resources, is available for any questions.
Questions? Good.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the Madera County's Public Information Team budget found on page 59. This budget is administered by the pit officer and has no allocated positions. Recommended expenditures are $10,000, of which reflects no increase. We are available for any questions.
Thank you, Yvette.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Good morning, Marie Castro, General Services. The next recommended budget for your consideration is the General Services Division budget, which is found on page 63 of the budget book. The General Services Department is tasked with oversight of county facilities, janitorial services, utilities, real property lease management, and capital projects. The recommended budget for the General Services Division is $340,395, which is recommended decrease $573 from the previous year. There are 3 positions allocated to this department, one of which will remain unfunded again this fiscal year. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Questions? Good.
Great. The next budget for your consideration is the building operations budget, which can be found on page 67. The building operations budget funds countywide janitorial services, which are provided by the county's contracted vendor, Commercial Cleaning Systems. Also included in this budget are window washing for the government center, power washing of the parking garage, and crow abatement services around the government center. Recommended appropriations for building operations are $635,449, which represents an increase of $163,218 over current fiscal year. That increase is attributed to a contractual obligation to fund an increase in California minimum wage for our contracted vendors. The addition of new county facilities, including the Ranchos Library and Sheriff Substation, Oakhurst Government Center, Tesoro Viejo Fire Station, and the new larger ag facility anticipated to be occupied in October. Further, day porter services for the libraries and ag facility in response to COVID-19 are included in this budget, which will be offset with CARES funding. And with that, I am available for questions.
Did, this increase was a lot of, from that way we done the pigeon environment now that we have up here, is that in this part of this budget?
So this is really attributed to the contractual obligation for minimum wage, which went from $12 to $13. The only bird abatement services is there's $15,000 to be paid to the Madera Downtown Association for crow abatement. So when we did all of the exclusion measures, that really resolved our pigeon problem and mostly on top of our facilities. What the crow abatement does is the streets, the street lights and the sidewalks and all the trees.
It does save us money though.
Yeah.
We've been
That's
doing it
15,000
4 times
included.
a year now. We won't have to do it 1 or 2.
They start in October through the end of the year. We make that one-time payment to the Madera Downtown Association, and it's their vendor. They handle the contract.
I think what is it, like we used to have to wash the windows more often.
Yes,
on
we
the
were able to reduce that down,
So we
yes.
were able to reduce that
Yes,
down?
yes, we were.
Okay.
I've noticed a big difference.
Yeah, there's a big difference, especially right out.
You don't see them at all in the
Yes.
garage. It's really amazing. Works really well.
Worked.
Yeah, very well.
Yeah, we only spent like 5 hours on it, on the budget item.
I remember.
We did.
Okay, go ahead.
The next budget for your consideration is the buildings maintenance budget, which performs building routine maintenance on all county facilities. This budget is found on page 69. The building maintenance budget includes contracts for fire systems inspections, elevator inspections, jail gate maintenance, and pest control services for county facilities. The recommended budget for this department is $1,589,989, which is an increase of $53,552 over last year, which is primarily due to maintaining current staffing levels. The department has 11 allocated positions, one of which will remain unfunded this fiscal year. And I'm available for questions.
And are we seeing a decrease with all the changes we've done to the HVAC systems and the lights and?
Yes. And with the phase 3 solar that we're doing, we're going to see even more, particularly here at the government center with the LED project.
It's remarkable how big of a drop in wattage use. Kilowatts. Thank you. Next.
The next budget for your consideration is the grounds maintenance budget, which is found on page 75. The grounds maintenance budget provides all landscape maintenance and repair for county parks and landscaped areas around county facilities. The recommended appropriations for this department are $544,275, which are increased $58,807 over previous fiscal year. The increase is primarily due to maintaining current staffing levels, as well as a new contract for ground services at the Health and Social Services Complex, which will be offset by a public health grant. The department has 9 allocated positions, 3 of which will remain unfunded in this fiscal year. And I'm available for questions.
Next.
So the next recommended budget for your consideration is the utilities budget found on page 81. The utilities budget funds gas, electric, sewer, water, and refuse disposal services for the government center, parking garage, and numerous other county facilities. Its recommended appropriations are $832,597, which is an increase of $143,447 due to increases in PG&E rates, as well as new facility costs for the Oakers Government Center and build out of the Government Center 3rd floor. We are available for any questions.
Can't keep up with PG&E.
But if you look at the amount of power that we use and what we've offset, if we hadn't done any of those things, I mean, to only go up by that much is pretty remarkable given the amount of usage that we have as a, I mean, had we not done anything, probably be about a $4 million budget.
Would be going up 30%, I believe, is amazing. Okay.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the auditor controller budget found on page 83. Recommended expenditures are $2,649,370, representing a decrease of $38,941 over the previous fiscal year. There are 20 allocated positions in this budget, of which 4 are unfunded. Lee Todd Miller, auditor controller, is available for questions.
Yeah, let's cut it in half. I think that'd be a good thing to start right now.
Laughing back there.
Oh, he come in. Jeez, I didn't see him.
Next.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the assessor budget found on page 89. Recommended expenditures are $2,416,396, which includes a decrease of $152,265 over the previous fiscal year. There are 26 allocated positions in this budget, of which 8 are unfunded.
Next.
The next recommended budget for your consideration, and there will actually be a page swap for page 95, part of the assessor budget.
95?
Yes. 5 will be swapped, and we do have those pages available for you.
And you got one for each one of us?
So the changes that were noted. Wanted to make sure everybody knew they were noted for. When we make our motion, we include those in
the motion.
So you don't want to throw away your 95 because it has 96 on the back of it.
Yeah.
The next recommended budget for your consideration is the Assessor GIS Layer Redraw budget found on page 99. This is a newly established budget that will fund the redrawing of the GIS parcel layer and align other layers to the newly aligned layer. Recommended expenditures are $1,250,061. Gary Savanda, assessor, is available for questions. The next recommended budgets for your consideration are the tax collector and treasurer budgets found on page 103. Recommended appropriations are $1,454,518, reflecting an increase of $106,982 over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to an increase in salaries and employee benefits. The department recommends a staffing allocation of 8.75 full-time equivalent positions, of which 0.25 FTE are unfunded.
Hi, good morning. Treasurer Tax Collector Tracy Kennedy here at your service. Since everybody's here, I think I told you last week in an email that we were going to mail out the tax bills, 57,000 of them, representing $200 million. We're going to delay that a little bit. Up in the mountains, a lot of their mail delivery systems have been compromised. They're sending their mail to other jurisdictions, Zwanee, Friant, Madera for Big Creek. I never did understand that one. So anyway, we're still within our statute as far as availability and timing. So there's no backlash as far as the timing. But I just felt it would be nice at least to just wait a little bit. There's no way we can sort them from the people at North Fork, South Fork, Bass Lake that have been evacuated. But so we'll just delay it a couple of days. Hopefully the fire will wind down and people somehow will figure out how to go get their mail. Because I know when you're in the throes of yet another disaster on top of COVID, it's hard to kind of keep your wits about you. In my office, I'm very proud on the tax collector side. We did this, and you'll all, when you ever get your tax bill, this little QR code, all right? So you can just hold your phone over it and click it, and it goes right to our website to pay your taxes. E-checks are free. And of course, we've done a lot of other innovations, I think, that I've been keeping up with. Our tax bills, as soon as they go out, our lobby traffic really increases, which I know that puts a horrible strain on the info booth. We're trying to go down and talk to security every day and let them know what our hours are, how to get upstairs, what we can do, how they can use a Dropbox, Becky's or one of our own. And anyway, so I apologize ahead of time to everybody in the government center, but that's just kind of the way it is, right? So we'll do our best to direct traffic and slow them down. Our doors are open, literally propped open because our door's so heavy, and but we're just allowing one taxpayer in at a time. Thank you.
Good call on the mail.
Would you be able to send them to the mortgage companies? Are you able to sort it out that way? Or
Yes, yeah, we can. Yeah, those can go because they should already be paid for in their mortgage, right? A Corcat company, yes.
Perfect.
But supplementals, we're still sending out. In fact, over the weekend, we had new bills printed due to building permits for change of ownership, and so about 100 tax bills went out today already. So for those types of things.
Good, thank you. Next.
The next recommended budget is the treasurer budget found on page 115. Recommended appropriations are $1,160,182, reflecting an increase of $83,809 over the current fiscal year, primarily due to the expected expenditures due to equipment maintenance. And Tracy Kennedy, Treasurer Tax Collector, is available for questions.
Next.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the county clerk recorder and elections budgets found on page 123. Recommended appropriations for county clerk recorder are $1,229,852, reflecting an increase of $88,595 over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to salaries and employee benefits. The department recommends 10.5 allocated positions, with 2 of those being unfunded. The other 0.5 of the administrative analyst is recommended to be funded by the elections budget. The county clerk elections budget can be found on page 131. Recommended appropriations for elections are $1,324,590, reflecting an increase of $267,004 over the previous fiscal year, primarily attributed to funding additional extra help personnel to assist election staff with the 2020 election. The department recommends a staffing allocation of 5.5 positions, of which 1 is unfunded. Rebecca Martinez, clerk recorder and registrar of voters, is available for any questions.
Presenters can assume that unless I interrupt you. Okay, so.
Thank you.
moving forward, I don't have to say next. Just go on. Thank you.
The next budget for your consideration is the Public Works budget, which begins on page 171 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures for the Public Works Administration budget is $4,585,793, which is an increase of $48,716 over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to increases in retirement health benefit rate. There are 35 allocated positions in this budget, of which 3 are unfunded. The next budget for your consideration is the Special Districts budget, which begins on page 181 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures is $3,384,855, which is an increase of $208,950 from the previous fiscal year, primarily due to increases in retirement health benefit rate. There are 23 allocated positions in this budget. All are funded. Matt Treber, Chief of Development Services, is available for any questions.
The next budget for your consideration is the Child Support Services budget, found on page 189 of your budget book. Total recommended expenditures of $3,205,173 represent a decrease of $115,633 from the previous fiscal year due to reductions in state revenues. The budget reflects 46 allocated positions, of which 11 are currently unfunded. This reflects a net decrease of 1.5 positions from the previous fiscal year. Sarah Hackett is available for any questions.
Did we skip over IT?
My apologies.
Okay.
Yeah.
When David said you can just say next.
39.
Yeah, 139 to, and then 169.
The next group of budgets for your consideration are the information technology budgets. These comprise of 3 budgets, one for the main information technology budget, one for the information security budget, and one for the One Solution budget. Apologies, Chairman, I believe we have a miscommunication. Who's doing that?
Grace.
139 is the.
Mr. Chairman, the main information technology budget reflects a recommended budget of $6,259,305, which is a decrease of just over $300,000 from the previous fiscal year, reflecting a net county cost decrease of $300,000 due to budget reductions the department has made in order to help with the budget crisis. Tanya Say, Director of IT, is available for any questions.
Y'all are doing a great job.
That is an amazing department because as we continue to do more with less, IT takes a bigger role in that. Thank you.
All right. The next group of budgets for your consideration are the district attorney budgets, which begin on page 197 of your budget book. Total recommended expenditures for all district attorney budget orgs is $6,677,436, represents a decrease of $207,892 from the previous fiscal year based on budget reduction measures implemented by the department. Proposed budget reflects 53 allocated positions from the previous fiscal year. Sally Moreno, Madera County District Attorney, is available for any questions.
For your able work. Stuff done there.
The next group of budgets for your consideration are the sheriff's budgets, which begin on page 231 of the budget book. Total recommended expenditures for all sheriff orgs are $26,897,047, represent a decrease of $511,185 from the previous fiscal year. This decrease is primarily due to reduced appropriations of the tree mortality program as activities begin its final phases during the proposed budget year. The proposed budget reflects 149 allocated positions, a net increase of 12 positions from the previous fiscal year. This increase in positions is primarily due to the following: a new agreement with Valley Children's Health Services reflecting 5 positions, 5 positions of COPS hiring grant to begin this current fiscal year. 4 will be assigned to the Bass Lake operations and for the staff ICR operations, and 1 position to augment the Valley Children's Hospital services. Tyson Pogue, Madera County Sheriff, is available for any questions.
Guy, for what you do. And all of your people. Appreciate them so much. I think it's worth saying these days especially, we appreciate our law enforcement, all branches of it.
The next budget for your consideration are the Department of Corrections budgets, which begins on page 335 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $18,246,583 represent an increase of $864,101 over the previous fiscal year, solely due to the increases in the cost of jail medical services agreement and the jail food agreement. This budget has 122 allocated positions, which reflect no change from the previous fiscal year. Daniel Perez, Corrections Director, is available for any questions. The next group of departmental budgets for your consideration are the probation department budgets, which begins with the juvenile hall budget found on page 349 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $20,763,112 present an increase of $1,190,540 over the previous fiscal year. The department's proposed budget has 144 allocated positions, a net increase of 4.5 positions over the previous fiscal year. Chris Childers, the County Probation Officer, available for any questions. The next set of budgets for your consideration are the fire department budgets, which begin on page 395 of the budget book. The fire department has 4 separate budget orgs, which include the Main County Fire Department budget, Station 8, Riverstone, and Tesoro Viejo. There are a total of 5 county positions allocated to this budget, which provides accounting support and heavy mechanic support to the county firefighters. The Main County Fire Department budget includes the funding for all county fire stations, including those stations included in the Amador plan. The total recommended budget for the fire department is $10,445,271, which is a decrease of $330,284 from the current fiscal year. Matt Watson, CAL FIRE Fire Chief, is available for any questions.
Do without those guys. Thank you so much for all your work.
So in the actual budget, it has the department as a fire prevention. Is that how it's?
This is the official name of the
That's
budget
official
board.
name? Okay.
We can certainly modify it to reflect current times in the next cycle.
Yeah, I think it should be fire protection.
Yes.
Right. The next budget for your consideration is the Agricultural Commissioner's budget, which includes the budget for the predatory animal control, and it begins on page 421 of the budget book. There will be a replacement page, page 428, that will be distributed to your board shortly. There was a typographical error in that 3 unfunded positions were inadvertently deleted in that page. The total recommended budget of $2,011,073 represent a decrease of $82,572 from the previous fiscal year. This budget has 15 allocated funded positions, and 3 unfunded positions, for a total of 18 allocated positions. It reflects the same number of allocated positions as the prior year. Stephanie McNeil, Agricultural Commissioner, is available for any questions.
Yeah, it's important. This predatory animal control is going to be important, especially as these fires drive some of them out of the foothills, kind of where there's more people. So it's important to keep this in, especially this year.
Next.
Right.
New guy's doing a good job.
He's doing a good job.
Yep.
The next budget for your consideration is the Community and Economic Development budgets, which begin on page 431. The recommended budget will begin with the Planning Division of the CED Department. The budget is recommended at $3,360,356, which represents an increase of $699,916 over the previous fiscal year. This division has 17 allocated positions, of which 4 are currently unfunded. Matt Schieber, Community and Economic Development Director, is available for any questions.
We're only assuming $106,000 in license and permit fee revenues. And that used to just be a good month.
Yeah, so that's zoning permits, the 106,000. So that's just specific to zoning permits. The planning services is where we see the majority of our revenue come in there.
The 879,000.
Oh, okay.
In 65, you said?
Yep.
So is it, what,
Sorry, the way I read it, it looked like the line, it went zoning permits 22,000 and other license and permits 106. So now I see it.
Yep.
We will fix that in the,
Yeah.
shouldn't be there.
Yeah. That's it. I was worried that we were projecting a very, very, very
lean.
big slowdown, and I said we may want to relook at this budget if that's all we've got in incoming permits. Thank you.
The next budget for your consideration is the CAD Building and Fire Safety Division budget, which begin on page 441 of your budget book. The recommended budget for the Building and Fire Safety Division is $2,808,560, which represents a $200,232 increase over the previous fiscal year. The department has 18 allocated positions, which is the same as the previous fiscal year. Matt Traber, Community Economic Development Director, is available for any questions. I'm sorry, Chief of Development Services. My apologies. The next budget for your consideration are the Water and Natural Resources budget, which begin on page 451 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $3,604,000 represent a $651,560 increase over the previous fiscal year. This department has 8 allocated positions, which reflects the same as the adopted CAO baseline budget. Stephanie N. Agneson, Director of Water and Natural Resources, is available for any questions.
thank you, Stephanie. Go ahead.
Good job.
The next budget for your consideration is the Flood Control Services Fund, which begins on page 455 of the budget book. This budget is not a part of the general fund and is a separate enterprise fund. It provides funding for flood system repair and other grant-funded projects. The recommended expenditures of $3,628,809 represent a decrease of $244,216 from the previous fiscal year. Stephanie Agneson, Director of Water and Natural Resources, is available for any questions. The next budget for your consideration is the Animal Services budget, which begins on page 461 of the budget book.
What about LAFCO?
My apologies, that was included in the presentation with the CED because it's lumped together.
Oh,
It is its own org, but with the command structure and the directors, it falls under the CED planning division.
okay.
I'm sorry, I should have, and I think I had a bullet point on that. My apologies.
Go ahead.
The recommended expenditures for the Animal Services budget is $1,428,038. It represents a $2,936 increase over the previous fiscal year. This budget has 17 allocated positions, the same as the previous fiscal year. I believe Cindy Avila is not able to make it due to her duties at the fire, but staff are available for any questions you may have.
Problem.
Good.
Doing a good job there.
The next budget for your consideration is the Fish and Game Fines budget, which begins on page 467 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $5,000 remain unchanged from the previous fiscal year. This is not a general fund budget, and staff is available for any questions.
We need to look at really getting in deep at this one, kind of budget work. Pretty big budget.
I'm sorry, Mr. Reza.
Oh, it's okay.
It's the mask.
Or catching too many fish.
He's smiling underneath his
I'm
mask.
smiling
All right. The next budget for your consideration is the trial court operations budget, which begins on page 469 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,311,128 remains the same as the previous fiscal year. This budget represents the county's historical share of annual operating maintenance costs for each court facility that was transferred to state control in 2007. Staff is available for any questions on this budget. The next budget for your consideration is the grand jury budget, which begins on page 473 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $78,640 remain the same as the previous fiscal year. We're available for any questions on this budget. The next budget for your consideration is the public defender budget, which begins on page 477 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $3,835,964 reflects an increase of $110,000 over the previous fiscal year. While this reflects an increase over the prior year budget, the negotiated agreement cost with the contracted public defender was actually reduced from what the approved negotiated rate would have been in order to assist with balancing the proposed budget. With that, we are available for any questions.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the Public Works roads budgets and begin on page 481. Recommended expenditures of the roads budget is $43,374,140, which is a $17,151,978 increase over the previous fiscal year for the replacement and rehabilitation of roads and bridges, scheduled road projects funded by SB1 and other federal roads and bridge funding. There are 69 allocated positions in this budget. All are funded. This is not a general fund budget.
This is exciting. Kinds of projects needed and waiting for years.
The next set of budgets for your consideration is the SB1 roads and bridges budget, which has expenditures of $8,688,877. This is a new budget established to accurately account for projects proposed to be completed with SB1 funds. SB1 funds have been budgeted in the road fund in previous fiscal years. Recommended expenditures for the roads transit budget is $4,388,975, which is an increase of $1,593,963 from the previous.
Go ahead.
From the previous fiscal year based on approved transit projects in the budget year. There are no positions in this budget. This is not a general fund budget.
Go ahead, Supervisor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to mention in regards to breaking out SB1 road and bridge funding from the regular road and bridge funding budget, I think it's still important to show them as a unit because we talk about, maybe a subunit or something. I can see from a budgeting standpoint how that's helpful to do that, but because overall we have, I think we have a $16 million a year obligation just to stay even with keeping roads in the current condition, if I recall from previous presentations. And if we break out, we say, well, we've got this SB1 money, what is it, 5.2 million or whatever it is, and then we've got this other money. But I think we need to show that it really is altogether a unit whenever we make presentations. For budgeting, this is great, but I think for presentations, I think that's important. Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Andrea Saldati, Deputy Director with Public Works. This is the first time we are removing the SB1 funding from the road fund due to the regulations of reporting. The commingling of the road fund and the SB1 funds was getting a little bit confusing in the reporting process. And so although they do impact exactly the same thing, like you were just stating, Supervisor Poitras, it is mainly just for accounting and reporting purposes because of the requirements of the funding.
Okay. It's also going to be interesting as time goes on too, to see where our SB1 dollars are in regards to as cars get more fuel efficient and there's more electric cars, to see what happens with that funding, to see if it just stays stagnant or goes down or whatever, because again, our road repair needs don't stay stagnant. They continue. I think right now we've got a $4 million a year deficit. Every year our roads get $4 million worse, and it could keep increasing.
And we started with a $487 million
deficit. Yeah.
That's when we get to SB2, and then they tax the per watt that comes out at a charging station.
Oh.
There you go. Exactly. All right. Well, thank you.
Next.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
I'm not introducing it as legislation. just so you know.
The next
Rhetorical
budget for
only.
your consideration is the Behavioral Health Services budget, which begins on page 497 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $34,671,607 represent a $4,169,684 increase over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to the increase in projected cost of contracted mental health services and increases in retirement benefits. This budget is 100% funded through state, federal, and other third-party sources with no net county cost. There are 166 allocated positions proposed in this budget, of which all are funded. Dennis Cook, Director of Behavioral Health, is available for any questions. The next budget for your consideration is the Public Health budget, which begins on page 515 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $23,220,115 represent a $5,500,546 increase from the previous fiscal year, primarily due to an increase in recommended staffing, including extra help staff supporting the department with COVID-19 pandemic response. This budget is 100% funded through state, federal, and other third-party sources with no net county cost. There are 120.5 allocated positions proposed in this budget, of which 13 are unfunded. Sarah Boss, Director of Public Health, is available for any questions. The next budget for your consideration is the Environmental Health budget, which begins on page 533 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,734,758 represent a $123,514 increase over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to the increase of extra help support to assist in the current office workload. This budget is 100% funded through state, federal, and third-party sources with no net county cost. There are 13.5 allocated positions in this budget, of which 1.5 are unfunded. Matt Treber, Chief of Development Services, is available for any questions. The next budget for your consideration is the Public Works Roads budget, Refuse Disposal Liner Fund, which is on page 543 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $12,003,300 reflect an increase of $1,627,751 from the previous fiscal year, primarily due to an increase in professional specialized services for contractual agreements. There are no positions in this budget. This is not a general fund budget. Matt Treber, Chief of Development Services, is available for questions. The next set of departmental budgets for your consideration is the Department of Social Services budgets, which begin on page 523 of the budget book. The total recommended expenditures of $99,384,088 represent an increase of $4,441,297 over the previous fiscal year. The total estimated net county cost of all social services programs is $3,014,166, which represents a decrease of $374,529 over the previous fiscal year based on projected third-party revenues and realignment revenues available for all programs. There are a total of 345.5 positions allocated to this department, of which 9 are unfunded. Deborah Martinez, Director of Social Services, is available for any questions. The next budget for your consideration is the Veteran Services budget, which begins on page 593 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $253,614 represent a $14,454 decrease over the previous fiscal year. There are 3 allocated positions in this budget, all of which are recommended funded. Josh Christofferson, Veteran Services Officer, is available for any questions.
Thank you for your good work, sir.
The next budget for your consideration is the Community Action Partnership budget, which begins on page 597 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $245,851 represent a $19,981 increase over the previous fiscal year and is based on the actual cost of the CAPMC Executive Director and the level of pass-through funding for the senior congregate meals. Maddie Mendez, Executive Director of CAPMC, is available for any questions. The next budget for your consideration is the Library Services budget, which begins on page 601 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,892,318 represent a $76,097 increase over the current fiscal year, primarily due to grant funding for the mobile library unit. There are 17 allocated positions for this budget, of which 3 are unfunded. Krista Riggs, County Librarian, is available for any questions.
Do you ever think when you came on as the county librarian, you just shut down all the libraries right when you get here? Thank you for figuring out ways to still get that information out to people. Appreciate you.
The next budget for your consideration is the contingencies budget, which begins on page 607 of the budget book. There are no recommended appropriations for this budget in the budget year. With the current crisis and continued focus to fund departmental line item budgets to reasonably appropriate levels, there is less need to fund contingency appropriations. In the prior fiscal year, the only transfers from this budget were cash flow loans, the water and natural resources grants, and one-time payment to a vendor. This budget has no allocated positions and is appropriated to meet unforeseen or emergency expenditure requirements. We are available for any questions.
Pretty low.
Pretty low. The next budget for your consideration is the cooperative extension budget, which begins on page 609 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $93,739 is an increase of $12,139 from the prior fiscal year and represents the additional contribution needed to offset reductions by the state in 4-H funding. By approving this increase, participation fees for families can be kept level for the upcoming fiscal year. We, as well as Karam Chodrandawa, President Madera Cooperative Extension Director, are available for any questions. The next budget for consideration is the central garage budget, which begins on page 617 of the budget book. Recommend expenditures of $2,901,902 represent a $187,000 increase over the current fiscal year, primarily based on the projected cost of maintaining the county's fleet. Due to cost efficiencies and lower cost of fuel, the central garage rates for the budget year is remaining level compared to the previous fiscal year. Expenditures in this budget are offset primarily by mileage charges by the user departments, as well as vehicle maintenance charges to subvented departments. There are 5 positions allocated to this budget, all of which are funded. Yvonne Flus, Central Garage Supervisor, is available for any questions.
With the much lower cost of fuel during this past year, was there some budget savings from the previous fiscal year?
Supervisor, so we have to take the fuel as a collective cost and as far as the rate. So I think we did see savings that went into the internal services fund, which then helped the Central Garage Internal Service Fund to keep rates lower moving into, we carried over those, there were savings, those carried over those savings, and that allows some cushion should some of the lower fuel rates assumed in the rate for 2021 is exceeded. So the answer is yes, but we weren't able to reduce it mid-year. That's just part of the normal thing. We set the rates for ISFs annually, but it does carry forward as fund balance, and that was taken into consideration when the rates were established. So just to point out, there in some categories, the rates are actually lower. In some categories, the rates are the same, which is probably the first time in the last 5 or 6 years that we've managed to do that with Central Garage.
So any decrease in travel would probably be noticed departmentally rather than general services.
That is correct. So a lot of the travel it's really either assigned vehicles to the department or when they check out the cars. So Steve has done a great job in reducing the size of the pool fleet to a level where it just meets demands. Now with the sharp decline in the travel, there is less usage. However, it is not largely the travel cost. There's just over, I believe, 20 vehicles that are in the pool fleet. So that is not the major line item in Central Garage. Another thing that's benefited the Central Garage is the county moving towards a leasing model. So a major change was when sheriff vehicles was moved into a leasing program. Due to based on the usage and our mileage replacements, we're cycling those every 3 years. With interest rates so low, Central Garage putting that in a 3-year lease proved more advantageous in terms of cash flowing the rates in the Central Garage.
Will there be a decrease in that due to lower mileage usage of those vehicles? I'm sure that we're going to see a huge decrease.
So The lion's share, the mileage charges to go into the garages for our public safety folks. So for a lot of it, sheriff vehicles,
So
and that's
those are
not
probably-
impacted, right?
Those are probably unlimited miles anyway.
Right. We're talking 130,000
Yeah.
miles in 3 years. So that accounts actually to more than 60% of the mileage rate. So even though there are decreases, it's still,
Okay.
that drives the cost. The other piece is subvented departments that travel less. A lot of them have assigned cars. So they carry those vehicles. Either they paid for it with grants and, they're still maintained. So even though they're not driving the miles, there's still a maintenance interval. So
Right.
the central garage is still able to charge those to the subvented program.
Right.
The next and final budget for your consideration is the microwave services budget, which begins on page 625 of your budget book. The microwave budget is an internal service fund that funds the microwave services for all from countywide. The recommended budget of $426,533 represents a $40,000, just under a $40,000 decrease from the previous fiscal year, and represents the cost of maintaining the county's microwave system. With that, Tanya Say is available for any questions.
That system ever become outdated and that a long term?
We defer to the department on that.
Yeah. Yeah, technology is moving pretty rapidly. You'd think.
What's our ham radio call sign?
Fire, gas out.
Good morning, Tanya Say, Chief Information Officer. In response to your question, yes, it will become outdated. Built into the budget this year is a replacement schedule. Since it's an ISF, we can start to save for a replacement that's coming up. So we are going to do another upgrade in, I believe it's 3 years.
Okay.
A piece of that will be upgraded.
Okay.
And we just got done replacing and upgrading the network connections, and now we're going to look at another infrastructure upgrade in 3 years.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our review of the budget book pending any request for public comment. I don't think we did public comment on this specific item yet.
Okay. We do have one public comment that we received on the budget, and it'll be noted. The name on that was Madeline Harris, and that will be included in the record. We received that in a timely fashion. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
After the public comment, we do need to read into record the special revenue fund budget,
okay,
which supports the
we
general
will
fund.
do that. I'm going to open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. It's been open, but I'm going to open it for public comment. Public comment. Okay, no public comment. I'm going to close the public comment portion of the hearing, bring it back to the board. What's your, I guess are we going to deal with all these all at once?
Mr.
Special
Chairman, we
revenue?
just need to read, we don't have to go through one by one special revenue fund. These are revenues that support the third-party revenues that goes into the general fund. We just have to officially introduce it.
Okay.
Have an opportunity.
You can, what's the pleasure of the board? You want to go through those one at a time? Do what he wants to do first?
Yeah, follow Joel's.
We'll follow your lead. Go ahead.
And Joel, Chairman, if you wouldn't mind, just as part of, after the presentation, because it is all one resolution, I've noted 2 revisions that would be a part of any motion the board wants to make to adopt the county budget, including the special revenue budgets for the year 2020-21. And that would be to replace page 95 of the presented budget that deals with the assessor and page 427 of the presented budget under agricultural commissioner weights and measures, unless there were any other noted revisions during the hearing.
So moved.
Jessica?
Okay.
Does that work with what you just said?
Yep.
Moving it? Okay.
Listening to what he says.
Are you gonna, do you have any more presentation or?
We just have to introduce the totality of the special revenue fund budgets.
Okay,
And that would conclude all of staff's presentation.
okay.
Okay. The special revenue fund budgets represent governmental funding streams that are tied to a specific purpose, like a grant or realignment. They are budgeted annually to meet statutory requirements and to provide an added level of transparency. These funds are budgeted as operating transfers into operating funds like the general fund, where they are utilized for operations. Staff from various departments are available for any questions you may have on any of these budgets.
The only one I have a question on would be the landfill, that closure. How are we doing on that projected? I don't see, well, I think he's,
Yeah, Matt's on his way in.
And while Matt's making his way, I think the Ag Commissioner page swap, page replacement is page 428, not page 427.
okay.
That changes my motion.
Go ahead, sir. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we were on track for our closure fund operations out there.
On the liner fund for the landfill,
Yes.
we are. We're going to be doing a lot of work out there with the assistance of really Joel and admin and HR. We're going to be bringing on a solid waste manager that will really be a big asset to the department, but we'll be looking at the compost regulations and the need to probably look at tweaking and updating that contract with our hauler and our operators out there. So,
Very good. Okay. GAO?
Okay, Chairman, with that, that is the conclusion of our presentation for the public hearing. You close the public hearing, I'll introduce item 4A.
Okay, at this time, we'll close the public hearing and go ahead.
I think I'm probably jumping ahead. The clerk can read 4A into the record.
Yeah, go ahead.
4A, discussion and consideration to adopt a resolution approving the county budget, including special revenue budgets for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
And just as a reminder, Chairman, that even though these are identical, we do need to open for any kind of public comment on 4A specifically itself.
Okay, so I will open any public here to address us on item 4A. And that, I think the comment was directed to 4A, so that noted for the record that from Madeline Harris, received at 8:30 something this morning and distributed all to all the supervisors.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Item 4A is a discussion and consideration to adopt a resolution adopting the budget and the county budget and the special revenue budgets for fiscal year 2020 through 2021 as presented to you this morning. We're available if you have any additional questions.
Move to approve with the replacing of page 95 on the assessor and page 428 of the Ag Commissioner budgets.
Motion is made.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Let's vote. Let the record reflect also that Supervisor Rodriguez has abstained from being will not be voting on the budget.
Supervisor Frazier?
Yes.
Supervisor Fortress?
Yes.
Supervisor Wheeler?
Yes.
And Chair Rogers?
Yes, we have our 4/5 vote.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, staff, for a great, very thorough and swift presentation. Preparation always makes for a smoother process, and we definitely have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I guarantee you, I would pit our process against any in the state. It's really, really well done. Thank you.
Efficient.
Okay, if there's no other items to come before us at this time, this meeting is adjourned.
All right.